Facebook friends, Marianne here. I just wanted to do a shout out today to all the women out there because there's a lot of stuff that's going on where people just aren't sinking. Now, yes, I know there's a war in Iran going on, but one thing that I have noticed is that, in basketball where somebody fakes you out and they act really, really intent, like they're going to throw the ball over here. And that always means that there's something over here that's happening that you should have paid attention to, because if you pay attention to all the noise, you're not going to see the stuff that's happening behind the hidden sight. And guess what? That is exactly how Trump works. So this is not meaning to demean or toss aside the importance of Iran whatsoever. However, with this current president, I tend to feel that he has a lot less concern about people in Iran and much more concern about filling his own pockets with money. All the other pretty much obvious things. So what are the things that are happening that they might not want us to say? Well, obviously, the Epstein files are an obvious thing people want to look at. But there's also a lot of talk about women's rights, and people may not realize it. Yesterday, January 27th was the anniversary of 1920 when women got the right to vote. I mean, that is not that far away. That means my grandmother was alive for a long time before she got the right to vote. My dad was born in 1925. So, we kind of understand what that means. Abby Holiday, for all the people out there that are realtors, guess what? You would not be allowed to do that job unless Abby Holiday fought so that you could actually own property, make money, buying, selling property. She fought to make it legal for you to have your job and for your female customers to even be able to be a customer. So all that stuff actually happened in the 1900s, fairly recently on the timeline of our country. And that's why we cannot afford to ignore the things that are happening. Now, when Project 2025 came out, not everybody read the minutia. I'm a nerd, so I like minutia. And there is something in there where J.D. Vance wrote the introduction to, so he obviously endorsed it. Our vice president was really gung-ho for it. And that was called the SAVE Act. And what that was all about was trying to make sure that anyone who goes to vote, you have an ID that matches the ID of your birth certificate. Pardon my voice. Again, let me say that. They want to make sure that your current legal ID matches the ID of your birth certificate. Now, if you're a man, that is no problem. You have the name you are born with and you have it for life. They say they're trying to get back at trans people. They're trying to get rid of people who are voting illegally, blah, 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 blah. But the group that it really hurts the most are married women. That means that when you get married, if you happen to take your husband's name and you go the full 9 yards of making it legal, then if you go and try to vote, ding, 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 you're turned away at the voting booth. Unless you have your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, and all the paperwork you filed to change your name to be a married name. And if you don't have all those three things that show a consistent, filing and doing all the things to have the name that you now have to become a Mrs. So-and-so, you don't get to vote. So why are they doing this? Well, to understand the history of this, and I think it's very important that we do, we have to understand that in Trump's first administration, he did a little social experiment where he put several $1 million to go send Steve Bannon, that happy guy, sent Steve Bannon over to Hungary. In Hungary, they launched the Make Families Great Again campaign. And Viktor Orban said that he wanted women to think of motherhood as the end-all, be-all things for women to do. Not something to do in addition to having a degree, not something in addition to having a career. And he saw it as women thinking that's in the way of their greatest pursuit. He wanted them instead to think that giving birth is the greatest pursuit and nothing else matters except being a baby manufacturing factory in your uterus. If you're not making babies out of that uterus, you're nothing. Well, they tried to put this campaign out there. They did everything they could to really get people all, excited about it. And they successfully reduced women's rights in Hungary to the 1960s. That means all the rights that the women had gotten used to in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and the 2000s, double O's, they lost. And guess what? Steve Bannon Trump and Viktor Orban and a lot of other politicians and cronies around them said this was a success. In fact, this was a social experiment that they want to replicate in the United States next. So that explains why the Heritage Foundation wrote that document they did, which J.D. Vance wrote the introduction to. It is all aimed to remove the women's right to vote. Now, earlier today, shout out to Michael Aho. You're always posting on there. I have no idea why you follow me. We disagree on everything. But hey, you do, so I'm calling out to you. So Michael Aho posted, and pardon me, my throat is just kind of being funky right now. But anyway, Michael Aho posted, and he is correct, that way back then in the 1920s, it was the Democrats who were absolutely opposed to getting women's rights to vote in the state of Texas. But you know what else back then? A lot of the Democrats were against, they were against desegregation, and blah, blah, blah. And people like to point this out a lot about how the Republicans at one time were more progressive than the Democrats were not. Now, my father was a big supporter of JFK. In fact, he was in such a small little group that when it came time for, after JFK passed away, Johnson came back and he talked to the top Democrats in the state of Texas, of which was my dad was one. Never interested in politics except to support it, never wanted to run for office. But he said, if we end up pushing for desegregation now, that means the state of Texas is the Democrats will lose any hold on Texas for anywhere from 50 to 100 years. Is this worth it? And of course, all the men said, absolutely, it's worth it. And so it was pushed. Desegregation occurred, thanks to all the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people that fought and sacrificed to make that happen. But that was the beginning of a change in which the Democrats became more progressive. Now, as they started standing against desegregation, as Republicans started standing for maintaining segregation, the parties really flipped. So in terms of what is progressive, and that also meant, now here's the one place where it didn't flip. The Democrats were always for the working man, for the farmers, for the blue-collar workers, et cetera, et cetera. Men like my dad, who helped build 7-Eleven from scratch, from nothing, and where he started working with his father and did everything from scooping up the poop from the cows and, driving trucks hours. Because he worked all those jobs when he became CEO, and people said, we need to add 2 more hours to the truckers, my dad could knowledgeably say, no, a human body cannot do 2 more hours. I can attest to that. But the days of a lot of CEOs who have been the blue-collar worker and worked every single job all the way to the top really pretty much ended with my dad. Now, you have amazing people who have experienced their own lives of working from nothing to building something. Jim Keyes is a beautiful example of that. But unfortunately, as things change, so a lot of CEOs have forgotten that in order to be at the top, you have a whole bunch of people holding you up. And yeah, that does include women. So, those that really remember it have been really pushing for the more progressive side of history. And as many of you are probably sick of me saying, I truly believe that a healthy democracy needs both healthy Democrats, healthy Republicans, or essentially healthy progressives and healthy conservatives. And the reason why I say that is that I look at it takes a progressive mind to innovate, to invent, to push something forward. So if you think of the first person ever thought about making concrete and built a foundation that allowed bricks to be put on it, the bricks are the conservatives. They put something on there, they hold it and stay, but in order to be held together, to glue, to make room for the next thing, again, you got more concrete, more cement. And so it's that combination of let's build, let's maintain, let's build, let's maintain. That's conservative, progressive, and the progressive is building and the conservative is maintaining, and any healthy society needs both, and they both have to respect the Constitution. And there's some that are ready to move forward and some not quite ready, and that natural tension is what allows us to help continue ourselves going upward. I saw a movie and there were a bunch of people that had to go up this tall tower, and they ended up figuring out by putting all their backs against each other and their legs on the wall, and they had to rely on each other's tension. But if one tried to go without the others, they would all fallen down. That is essentially what a healthy democracy is doing, that tension between progressive and conservative, so that we can help pull each other up to where we want to go and evolve. City on a hill, all that jazz. But the problem is that right now we are having our democracy hijacked. And the most vocal voices out there that would probably be opposed to certain things, such as within the ICE centers, whether you're for having concentration camps or not, you're probably interested to know that they are taking every pregnant woman. It doesn't matter if they are an 11-year-old girl that was raped or a 40-something-year-old woman. They are putting all pregnant women within one of the concentration camps in Texas. And the reason why this is important is that abortion is not available in Texas right now. That means that an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old that got raped by some random stranger or their uncle or whatever, that was going to get an abortion so they could get their life back, is essentially psychologically being raped again by being forced to have that child. Now, not only that, so those of you who are pro-life, don't care if someone's raped, make sure the kid comes out fine. But people that are truly pro-life actually care about the well-being of the mother and child. In which case, you'd be probably horrified to know that ICE has had a actual ruling within ICE or requirement to deny, emphasis on deny, healthcare since October. No healthcare provided since October. So if we are tossing all these young girls and women who are pregnant into one concentration camp and they're going to be denied healthcare, what in the world are they planning? I have no idea. But we've already known that they have been denying menstrual pads, tampons, and things to women that are in these ICE camps. So, we know that the treatment of women in these camps is not a good thing. So looking at the history of our more recent country, yes, people out there that are saying, hey, the Republicans pushed to have women's right to vote. Yes, you were right back then. But guess what? In the more recent history, which is what I'm concerned about because I am a female living in the 21st century, I'm concerned about what is happening now, today. I am concerned about women who are pregnant now, today. Young girls who have been raped and are pregnant now, today. I'm concerned about women who are in the concentration camps who are denied menstrual pads and tampons. I'm concerned about that now, today. I'm concerned about the fact that the whole Make Families Great Again campaign, in which Viktor Orban championed and which Trump was so gung-ho behind that he wanted to replicate because the whole thing was actually created in Hungary and funded by our government under Trump's last administration, led by Steve Bannon, all aimed to get rid of women's rights and roll them back to the 1960s as something that they openly state they want to replicate in the United States. I'm concerned about that because that's happening now, today. I am concerned about, seeing that we have J.D. Vance as a vice president that loved that idea so much that he wrote the introduction to it. I'm concerned about that now, today. So I can go on and on and on. I am concerned about the SAVE Act. Again, as I mentioned before, that anyone would be trying to be so finagling, strategic, and manipulative that they would say, does your name match the name that you were born with? Oh, well, that may make it harder for women. They're going to have a lot more paperwork to prove they can vote at the vote booth if they've gotten married and changed their name. Oh, well, too bad. I'm concerned because that party is doing that now, today. I can go on and on and on and on the list. I can look at all sorts of healthcare issues and things that, women have been cut off of being required to be covered by insurance and stuff now, today. I can go on down the list again and again and again and again. And I'm deeply concerned about the fact that a lot of the Republicans are really wanting to remove women from colleges. They're saying they're taking up too much room for the young men. And yet, that's the irony about the whole DEI thing. People are talking about, we want to make sure people that actually pay, pass the test and are getting into college and getting into universities are the ones who are passing. No special things for you belong to a demographic. Okay, fine. Well, the number one demographic getting doctorates in the United States, Black women. African American women are getting the most doctorates of any demographic in the States. Number two demographic going after master's degrees and doctorates in the States, women, period. You want to know the number one demographic not pursuing higher level education right now in the United States? Young men. I don't know why. Maybe it's because a lot of us had grandmothers and mothers who said to us, make sure that you don't depend on a man to be able to eat and pay your bills, because you never want to be beholden to a man in case you are abused. You want to make sure that you can take care of yourself. And if you have a child, you want to make sure that you can take that child to a place of safety should the man end up being an abuser. Well, this is a realistic thing because a lot of women and men may not know, but the number one demographic who kills married women are their husbands. Now, obviously, there are many beautiful and wonderful husbands in the world. I'm very blessed to have one. But it is very smart for women to be able to make sure they can make their own money. A lot of young men are upset about this because what's happening now is that women are not stuck in a marriage because of financial needs. They don't stick it out. And we hear that complaint a lot from the Proud Boys. And instead, we should be asking what makes a woman want to stick around, that you're respectful, that you believe her human rights are equal to your own, her civil rights are equal to your own. I hear a lot of Republican men complaining that they can't keep a girl if they find out that they are Republican. Well, maybe the reason they can is because they know if you side with MAGA, you side with an agenda that is removing her human rights, her access to education, and her civil rights. That's pretty much, and should she ever fall into problems with the law and she's put in prison, you support the party that's basically denying her sanitary products, feminine sanitary products. Maybe she'd take that personally. I don't know. I think I would if I were dating. But I'm just sharing all this out because these are things that are happening in our country right now. And obviously the Epstein files are a big deal, but that is just the most obvious thing in terms of women's rights. And as we reflect on January 27th, the day that our grandmothers, or in some cases great-grandmothers, fought for us to be able to have the right to vote, we owe it to all those young girls out there to make sure that they do not grow up with less rights than we have. Because I don't know about you, but as a woman, I am grateful. And I'll share this with all the men out there who've decided to listen to this whole thing. If you are a man and you want to marry a woman, wouldn't you rather have that woman marry you for you and not because of the money that you put on the table? Because, if a woman loves you for you, money can come and go. You can have highs, you can have lows. The stock market can crash, something can happen, someone can have a health effect, and suddenly all the money gets used up to save their life, and there are a million things that can go on. I'm very blessed. People would call me a one percenter. I am. But there are times when I've been absolutely strained because I had to take care of multiple people's health issues at one time. It adds up. So put it this way. If you are with somebody and you know that they love you, they are going to be there regardless of if the money is there or if it's not. If a woman marries you because you put money on the table and you're the one who is doing all that, the minute you are not putting that money on the table, why is she going to be there? So wouldn't you rather be with a woman who makes her own money, has her own money, and is with you because she loves your soul, your intelligence, your sense of humor, is attracted to your body, and wants to live out into old age because of you, regardless of what the finances are? To me, I would think that would be a real relationship. Whereas the other one, it's just about the money. So, men really should reconsider. If you want a real relationship, then of a woman that's going to be with you through thick and thin, then you want her educated. You want her with her own bank account. You want her bringing in the money. And if you know what, if you want a world like that, where women's natural compassion and caring for the elderly and the vulnerable and the children and whatnot, which any given healthy society should have, then yeah, women need the right to vote. And you know what else? I'll just leave you with this. A lot of people don't realize that our entire Constitution was really inspired by the Iroquois nation, which had 3 houses of government. But unlike our 3 houses of government, one of the houses was the women. One of the houses was so that you could have a female perspective on things. And of course, our founding fathers didn't think that was such a great idea at the time, even though we have records of letters that their wives wrote saying how they'd sacrificed and fought and felt betrayed that their husbands did not give them the right to vote, which they felt rightfully so that they had earned equally. But since it took so many centuries after that founding of that Constitution for women to be able to get the right to vote, and even later for Native American women to get the right to vote, I think that we all need to be paying pretty big attention to what's going on now. Especially when you hear a lot of people on the right say, we are going to war with Iran. They try and paint all Muslims as if they hate women and blah, 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 blah. Yes, I'm aware that there are countries in which women are not treated very well. They are mostly Muslim. There are also countries, such as Malaysia, where women are treated very well, which is mostly Muslim. But if they really cared, isn't it interesting that the men who are first to point fingers about that are also the first to support what's happening over here with MAGA, the Heritage Foundation, Steve Bannon, bringing that Make Families Great Again campaign back to the United States, and trying to roll the same thing out over here. Pay attention to what happened in Hungry America. Pay attention to the fact that there are battles being fought, and huge gratitude to all those to help bring back down the SAVE Act. But don't take it for granted, because I promise you, this administration wants to nix women's rights. And again, I'm saying this as an independent who is not, I am not a Republican, I am not a Democrat. I vote on the issue and on the person. And this is concerning. So while they're all talking about Iran and Epstein, blah, 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 and that's all important, please, women, pay attention to your rights in this country.